fear we may not be able to. If we can't, I'll talk you through the maps if you can't understand, if you can't see them clearly from that range. We live on a blue planet, 71% seawater by area, and rising. But our histories of it, until recently, have been far too green and brown. Of late, that's begun to change for the last 500 to 1,000 years. Maritime or ocean history, a new
this is a famous archaeologist who has written the history of the Mediterranean Ocean,
the Chinese and Pacific Seas, over the last half millennium or so. Now, from that point of knowledge, one could do two things. One option is to look forwards, over the cusp of the present and into the future. And this is where I find out whether this wonderful machine works. It does. To look forward to the next 10 or 20 years, for example, in the seas of south and east of China and adjacent nation states, where sea laws set out during the recent age of Western hegemony confront far deeper time and more ineffable Chinese claims. This, of course, one of the hotspots for where World War III may or will break out. One could go further into the future and think of oceans that at the moment we can hardly dream of. The great Arctic Ocean that is being opened up by global warming. The New North, as it's been. Down we go. I thought something would happen. Yeah. Those of you under 40 in this audience will probably have the opportunity to take a cruise to the North Pole, which, before you crack open your champagne upon arrival, I suggest you contemplate the deeper meaning for our planet of what that possibility will mean. But even today, if you look at the number of ships stopping at a port like Archangel, Anchorage, it's doubling pretty well every year. We are creating new oceans.
I hope we don't get to go on an Arctic
that will create,
cruise.
will diffuse attention from areas like the South China Sea. Are we likely to get any pictures back? Fantastic. I'll plough on regardless. I'm sure you can all imagine your map of the world, and soon we'll get back to rather sort of smaller and more focused areas. Because today what I'm going to do is look in the other direction, not into the future, but from the perspective of deep history. A deep history accessed through an archaeology of a data omnivorous kind. And I think there are three reasons why this kind of deep archaeological history matters. One is it gives us an awareness of the rootedness of maritime propensities in our species, among human beings, across time and space. Secondly, unrelated in a sense, it shows us the deep foundations of many of the patterns and problems that emerge into the light of more recent, traditionally defined history of recent centuries and today. And thirdly, I think it encourages us to think differently about the messages we derive from history. A history not of empire and state, of ethnic boundaries and difference. A history of networks, a connective history, a reticulous one if you like, and a more deeply tolerant history for all of us. We move on. In fact, if one thinks back into evolutionary time, oceans have been important to how we came into being from hundreds of millions of years ago. The new biogeography is producing some very interesting patterns in the evolution of monkeys. And here I had a very nice picture of all kinds of very pretty South American monkeys, but you can imagine what they might look like. We've long known two very basic things about this part of the world. Firstly, that South America and Africa used to be tectonically joined. The great bulge of Brazil fitted into the bite, if you like, of Benin and the arc of West Africa on the one hand. We knew that, and we knew that every monkey living in South America today is descended from an ancestor living in Africa. For a long time, the most parsimonious and obvious reason to explain that is when South America and Africa were sundered, the monkeys went with them and differentiated with an ocean between them. Nice and easy.
So we're all Africans,
Wrong.
really.
Because the genetic clocks are now producing a very, very interesting result. Crude as they are, disputed as they are, it is more or less beyond doubt that the South American and the African monkeys diverged genetically after the Atlantic began to open. They transferred across a narrow precursor of the great ocean that separates America and Africa and Eurasia today. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that monkeys developed boats. It did mean they meant to do it. But getting across the sea has been a very deep time pattern in our ancestors' evolutionary history. And this continues into the world of early hominins and early human dispersal. Most of the way in which we got around the planet, our ancestors got around the planet, were largely terrestrial. But we see some very interesting and striking short-range exceptions. One of them, probably the most famous, comes from the island of Flores in Indonesia, where something just under 1 million years ago, Homo erectus, one of our direct ancestors, managed to get across a water gap of probably 15-20 kilometers across a line called Wallace's Line, which is one of the great biogeographical dividers between the animals of India, Asia, Southeast Asia on the one hand, and the marsupials of Australia. By 50,000 years ago, plus or minus, our direct ancestors, Homo sapiens, had made it to Australia itself, across a barrier of something
People
like
think that Homo sapiens
60 to
are
100
us human
kilometers.
beings, but that's actually not
impressive.
true. We are
They'll have been
Homo
doing that on
sapiens
dugout
sapiens.
canoes,
So
little bits
that's
of
a new
wood.
tidbit for
That's
everyone
a
out
long way.
there.
And of these deep time perspectives, the one that amazes me most, it gives me goose pimples, is a little tiny island in Melanesia called Manus.